So I'm no longer Tableau Tim. That feels pretty wild to say, but if you've been watching this channel for a while, you've probably seen that I've been traveling in a direction of change for the last few months. But this change feels extreme and probably needs some context, hence this video. I just want to sort of get this out there in the open, given I've had a few questions, and also I think it deserves proper context. I also want to clear up some strange facts that have been milling around within Salesforce. So here we are. The short and simple version is that I've stepped away from the Tableau Visionary Program, specifically a Salesforce community engagement program. And as a result, I've decided to change the name of the channel away from a Salesforce trademark. And so it's going to be just called Just Tim. It's just literally my name, but tim.com is not available, so Just Tim felt more appropriate. There is a longer version though, and I think it's worth telling the story properly and getting the context out there. But just off the top, and this is not a big falling out, this is a decision I made. It wasn't something that Salesforce ever asked me to do. It's something that I've decided to do given a reflection that was set off by a chain of events, let's say. And so here I am. I still love Tableau. I'm still going to be using Tableau. I'll still be making Tableau videos, but nonetheless, I think this context is necessary, and I kind of want to get a few points out there as well. Now, there is also a newsletter version of this, which I think is much more succinct, has all the points I want written down. The problem with doing a video is that sometimes as you're making the video, you kind of go off script. The newsletter is like the polished version of what I want to say. So a link to that is also below. You can check it out on LinkedIn or on my newsletter homepage as well. So what caused this change? A couple of weeks ago, Salesforce raised a concern around my involvement in the Sigma influencer program. Now, influencer programs are very, very common in the social media space. I think it will shock most people to know that I have a channel the size I have, and I've never had sponsorships on the channel. It's been a deliberate choice that I've made. People have approached me about sponsorship, even if it's just, sponsoring a specific video. But I've always managed that very, very carefully because I try and sort of strike this balance of not coming across as someone who sips the Kool-Aid. I like to maintain this level of independence around what I think is good and what I think is not good about products. And so whenever I've had those conversations, I've always made it challenging for the sponsors because I've always sort of led with the fact that, listen, let's separate my opinion about the product from what you want to get at. And often that's not what my sponsors are in it for. They're in it to sort of get the voice of the creator to say in their authentic voice why their product is good. And sometimes that works, but sometimes I'm just very wary of coming across to you, my audience, as being disingenuous. Now, the specific newsletter that kicked it off was a line I added in my previous newsletter where I mentioned that I had not yet been sponsored by Sigma, but I will be in the future. I think some people at Salesforce read this as I had been sponsored. And so to this day, even to the point I'm having this video, I've not yet received a single penny from anyone ever as a sponsor. I'm still something that I'm exploring, even though I have been approached by other companies. Sigma are not the only ones. There are many other companies who want to have that conversation, especially this year since I gave out that signal that I wanted to do that. They're not the first and they won't be the last. And so when Salesforce raised this objection about the influencer program, their specific note was around the payment aspect of it, and then specifically the endorsement of a competitor product, specifically signaling it as a best-in-class tool in the industry. And I have to say, the way these programs are written is that sometimes those aims are obviously the aims of the company, but they don't always have to align with the creator. For example, I've been in the Tableau Visionary program for a long, long time, and I think Salesforce would say that part of the reason they have that program is to try and establish Tableau as a leading analytics provider. That's just the standard goal of the aims. But if you've also been sort of seeing my content over the last 3 years, you'll also know that I've also been very critical about instances where I don't think that is the case, Tableau Next being the most recent example. So I don't shy away from being critical, but I also think I'm very fair about the way I do it. I don't raise critique that I haven't yet validated or haven't yet seen, and I don't point in a direction where, I potentially read into assumptions about how the product has landed that way. I simply look at what's in front of me and I say what I say. I don't then run off and say a bunch of things about the people, about the company, or anything like that. So I've always really worked hard to keep a healthy balance. And so faced with the option of continuing in the program, but having to step back from those kinds of conflicts of interest, I simply made the decision of walking away from the Visionary program. A few days, I think, from being nominated to be in the Visionary Hall of Fame, which sucks. But nonetheless, I think it was a decision I had to make, and I think it's the right one. Because on reflection, when I think about it more, I also realize that actually, for the last 5 years, I've been part of a program that also hasn't necessarily been sort of, let's say, clear about the way that it goes out to its ambassadors, to its members around their involvement. And so in the UK, there's a very specific way that social media works. And I actually have to say that different countries have different rules on this point. Depending on the social media rules in your country, any sort of endorsement, any sort of interaction with a company that exchanges either monetary value, access, anything like that is considered sponsorship. So if I have to reflect on my involvement in the Visionary program, at least when it started, these rules weren't so crystallized. But now, over the last 3 years, they have become very crystallized. And I think maybe in the Visionary program, there's been a missed opportunity to highlight that when people are, for example, going to conference, but not highlighting that they're getting free access to the event. When people are speaking at Tableau events, but they're also not sharing the fact that they get access to the product to be able to talk about the product. And that exchange means that those people get placement, they get exposure, they get career access sometimes. And that balance in itself is quite blurry. It can go anywhere from the spectrum of, direct payment for posting a piece of content all the way to where we are in the Tableau Visionary program, where it's kind of blurry, kind of getting payment, but it's not in monetary terms, no actual, number in your bank account for you to get audited and seen. So needless to say, I kind of realize actually, if I want to keep on making content the way I do with an audience that I have and the scale of audience that I have, actually, I need to do a better job of keeping these two separate. So I decided to step away from the Visionary program. And given I had the rule book thrown at me once, I thought it was also a good idea not to give Salesforce a second chance to come at me again by telling me to get off a trademark. Hence, TableauTim is no more. I want to touch on one thing, which is, I'm going to call it leverage, or let's just call it leverage. I've made over 600 videos. I passed that milestone literally just a few videos ago. And what you don't see behind every single one of those videos is the huge personal cost that goes into that. It's time, investment, energy. Some of that is a little bit of sacrifice, choosing to do this over something else. And that's a personal decision. I would never change any of it. And I never did any of it because I wanted to be in the program. It would be a pretty inefficient way to go about being in the program, if I'm brutally honest. So the videos were a thing of passion, a thing of energy. And when I started it, I saw a gap. I saw a gap that wasn't being filled by Salesforce or Tableau themselves. And I saw a gap that wasn't being filled by anyone else. And so I put this tremendous amount of energy to prove a point, to make a statement, to say, hey, videos can be a demonstrable net positive to the community. And here's how to do it to a high standard. And so I'd like to think that I helped kickstart this Tableau video community, as it were. Yes, other people have made videos before. I went back and I've looked at all those attempts, and I think it wasn't until I set up this sort of really structured beat to covering new features that other people really saw the playbook of how to do this. So I saw people copying thumbnails. I saw people sort of taking the same approach. And then I started to see what I wanted to see, which is people taking it in their own direction. And the community has massively exploded. There are people who make videos about Tableau and other technologies that go well beyond anything I could have imagined. And they do it in their own unique way and in their own take. And they don't have the same view count, but if you watch some of that content, it's just as good. They just simply haven't had the time to build up the same sort of momentum and audience that I have. And also YouTube is changing. Like, there's so many different things going on with social media. So I was lucky to hit it at a very specific time. But what people don't see is that even if I post a video that's critical of Salesforce or critical of Tableau, what I've always done is made myself available to Salesforce or Tableau to step to those comments. So you might see me writing a very critical piece about Salesforce, but I also then have to stand behind those comments to Salesforce, and I offer my time to the product development team. Sometimes 3 to 4 calls a month when it's super busy. When it's quiet, maybe it's just 1 call a month, but I make time, and I have always made time for anyone who works on product, UX, product development, the sales teams, the marketing teams. I've worked with pretty much every possible aspect of the Salesforce org. Even had Mark Benioff drop me a DM in my X account. Unfortunately, I ghosted him, but nonetheless, I've worked with pretty much every element of Salesforce to try and better the product, try and better the company. And that's a cost you don't see. And that actually sits behind all of this. And so it kind of fills me with a bit of dismay that given all of that sort of open access and, back and forth and the simple ability to be able to stand to this content, that, this one engagement that didn't happen is what's used as a signal to say, hey, we're not sure about, where you're going. But what it does show is that at least this has always been the case, even before Salesforce acquired Tableau, is that Tableau always felt like it had leverage, right? And that leverage comes from a perspective of understanding that the tool that you're making is at a place of prominence in the analytics industry. So there was a point in time where that was absolutely valid. But the analogy I like to give here is it's a bit like Yamaha telling pianists that they should be grateful for the platform that they've been given, because if Yamaha didn't make the world's best pianos, these musicians wouldn't make the world's best music. It's kind of a strange balance. And I've had this argument sort of played back to me, and I don't jive with it. I just let the argument sort of come across, but I don't buy that at all. In fact, let me get something. Hold on. All right. My hands are full. This is my YouTube plug. I got this for 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. Along the way, I was recognized multiple times. The Visionary Program, and ultimately by Salesforce with the Golden Hoodie. I communicate it in that order because that order matters. I was here first for my audience, and there was never a point in this relationship where leverage existed for Tableau or Salesforce. I didn't need the recognition. I was going to do it anyway. In fact, there are many content creators on YouTube with far more impact and reach than I do. Specifically on Tableau, I'll call out Data with Barry as an example, who have been, yes, recognized as an ambassador, but they didn't do it for that. They've gone and exceeded that specific milestone. So it's always interesting when Salesforce approached me and this was the move they made. And it assumed they had leverage in this situation, as if I didn't have some other choice. And also the timing of it was a little bit off. I mean, a few days to go before the Visionary announcement, potentially me being in the Hall of Fame. I don't actually know because, like I pulled myself out of the program before they said anything. So for all I know, I could be sat here big-headed, but you wouldn't have needed to approach me if you hadn't nominated me to be in that selection. So this point I make about leverage is to highlight that for those who are still in the program, it's very strange to me that Salesforce thinks it has this leverage. It's strange to me that Salesforce and Tableau think that what the people in the program do could be done better by them. I don't think that's the case at all. In actual fact, I think a large majority of the people in the program offer far more to the program than they get back from the program. And I say that in the nicest possible way, and I don't want to talk on their behalf. If I just give a simple example, I look at Tristan and what he's doing with the Data Viz. His innovation there is keeping Tableau current. Tableau Desktop is current because of the innovation that Tristan is doing. If I look at the extensions that have been built by Salesforce, then just not as good. They're just not as exciting. The ideas and the innovation coming out of the community and partners, I should add, is just far more energetic. I even call this out in my newsletter. I said that the place where the most energy and innovation is happening is outside of Salesforce. In my opinion, there is innovation happening within Salesforce, but it's just headed in a completely wrong direction. And I think, time will bear that out. I'm happy to put my hands up and say I'm wrong when that doesn't. But needless to say, when I had this conversation, I was genuinely shocked and surprised. And so for that reason, it just made so much logical sense to step away from the program and to understand that all of this can just be a lot simpler if I'm not part of the program. The final thing to add here is that I think we live in a world where many companies have many tools. Like, I'm a consultant, I have been for 12 years. I can't go into specific instances, but at least in the last 3 years, it's been uncommon to see Tableau on its own in any organization. I've seen it alongside Power BI. I've even seen it alongside other more modern tools. I have an instance in my head now where Tableau and Sigma are in an organization at the same time, and the use cases that are being used for both of them make perfect sense. And it's surprising to me that at a time where you want people to be championing the best of what's possible with your product and how it hooks into other places, I don't think it's viable to expect your program members to be single tool minded. You know, there's going to come a time when Databricks and their BI capability rivals Tableau's. And when that time comes, you're going to want your visionaries, you're going to want your ambassadors showing the best of both worlds, showing how Databricks and Tableau work together, rather than telling them, hey, they can't talk about Databricks, because the reality will just move on. Like, the world doesn't wait for Salesforce to realize where the industry is going. And so I also think that's an unrealistic ask going forward. It should be possible for someone to be on the program and also be working with other technology vendors from a place of fair reflection. And I'm not saying, hey, you know, we all don't have tribes. Of course, I get that we have tribes, but it's really unrealistic to expect anyone on the program, for example, to be only building tools for Salesforce, to be only working for specific programs. So I call this out as a way to kind of help those people still in the program to kind of realize that I don't think it's right. I just do not think that's right at all. And, you know, this specific example has shown me that maybe I should have seen this coming. The final point I'll make is I think I've been lazy. I think I've been really, really lazy. And I mean this from a community perspective. I realized last week that it's not until actually, you know, I said I was stepping away. I realized this last week that I have been conflating my participation in the program as analogous to being in the community. So what do I mean by that? When you're part of this program, you're added to a Slack instance that's internal to this community. So visionaries and ambassadors all sit inside of this Slack community. And what that gives you is this sort of immediate access to other people in the program. So you kind of feel like you're in the room, but, you know, I've not really contributed much. And by contribution, I mean in terms of relationships. I've just sort of said, hey, because I'm in this room, I'm therefore a member of this community, and I'm therefore doing my part to contribute to it. But if anyone, you know, here knows anything about communities, the easy bit is being in the room. The hard part is actually contributing and putting energy back in and then getting that energy back out. And although I've done that with individuals, I've not done that with the collective as well as I could have done. And I sort of was lazy about my involvement in the program and took it to be like a replacement to that activity. And so one thing I'm going to try and do is try and push even harder to collaborate directly with people rather than relying on the programs that I've been part of to be a catalyst for that. And I think that's something that I've learned as a point of reflection, and I just wanted to put it here because I think it's the most sort of appropriate place. Finally, a big thank you to you, my audience. YouTube's becoming a very challenging place. You maybe have seen that I've been trying shorts, and for some bizarre reason, YouTube pushes shorts like no one's business. I took a really long video that I did and I cut it up into shorts, and YouTube is pumping that out like no one's business, which I don't get, because I sort of think to see and do what we do, you need to have a nice large screen. It doesn't work well on your phone. And I've tried so many different ways, but that is the way. So I'm going to have to keep pushing to figure out how to get into that tool format rather than sort of the long form content that I do, but I'll still invest time in doing the long content. I'm taking a massive step back and rethinking everything. And so over the next 2-3 weeks, I've been teeing up conversations behind the scenes. I've got some pretty exciting conversation. Next week, we're going to be hearing from not a brand new, but a new entrant into the data prep space. So check out that when it comes in. I'm having conversations behind the scenes with other technology partners, some of which I've mentioned in my newsletters, others that are turning up out of the woodwork, having seen my posts. So it's really, really exciting and invigorating. And I think I'm going to spend a bit of time just defining what that means. What you'll see is you'll see things like my thumbnails change, go through a bit of change. I wasn't happy with my thumbnails for the last year and a half. Something went wrong with them. I kind of want to go back to the old one, but I don't want to as well, because, you know, that was an old Tim. So we'll sort all of that out over the next coming months. And then on top of that, I have some really exciting projects that I'm working on, one of which is a learning platform I'm super excited to share with you. So when that drops, I think we can take this learning journey into a whole new direction that I don't think people are ready for. I'm super excited about it. I'm working with 2 great individuals to bring that to market. So I'll keep that on wraps until we actually have something to share in a big way. But yeah, that's kind of where I am. So I wanted to make this video. Like I said, check out the newsletter version. It's so much more concise. It says everything I needed to say, and it's probably going to be a lot shorter to read. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. And this is the first video. It's just Tim.